Okay.
We're going to read from first chapter of James. Matter of fact, the last two verses of the chapter, verse 26 and 27. These are quite the verses. And you'll notice in James or any place, some of these verses are real powerful verses of thought. Look what it says here in verse 26. If any man among you seem to be religious, and bridleth not his tongue, he deceives his own heart, and his religion is vain. Now you don't need me to help you understand that verse. In modern language, watch your tongue. Verse 27, pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless, the orphans, and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. I think you could pick out some pretty good pointers there out of each one of those verses. But we've already spent some time analyzing the thought of bridling our tongue. Now, James has already said, be slow of speech. Have you watched this more since I've been talking about it? Your tongue and what people say, and especially what should not be said. Oh my. Slow to speak, but then he says you need to put a bridle in your mouth too. And watch that tongue. Because if you're not careful, this kind of activity, you get deceived in it. I recall a man who at first I called the church historian, because he knew all the news of what was going on, the church here and congregations everywhere. And I mentioned that to someone, and the person said, well, that's saying it lightly. It wasn't just historical fact, it was just, he was talking things that really shouldn't be talked. But I think that's kind of true every day, that we need to be careful what we talk about. Let me say it from this standpoint. Have you ever thought of the things that you say, that I say, that we all say, that should never be spoken? Have you ever walked away from a situation and told yourself, well, I don't think I should have said all of that? I've tried to watch my tongue a little more. We don't need to say things, and especially the interchange of we're family members. If there's children and so on, we don't need to say to this one what this one said and so on.
Yes.
Just to keep the calm, keep the cool, and not stir up feelings. I don't even like to talk about the busted bales out there in the field. I like to look at the bales that are all baled up solid and they're ready to go on the hay rack. Well, I always come out there with the pickup and kind of watch, because that's my daily entertainment. My video, better video than what some of this TV stuff is. But I can look around and see that bale that didn't wrap. And when Mike got out of the tractor, I could go up there and say, "What happened to that bale?" I don't even mention it. I don't even like to talk about it. Just stay away from talking about the things that, well, he's already upset over it. Got a special delivery, that big round bale, to the cows somehow. Now there's a lot of things in life. The cooking in the kitchen. Sometimes you get the extra smell that comes out of the kitchen. Oh my goodness. Well, I warn her, "Hey mama," but I don't go in there and say anything about, well, what I could say. You know, we can say a lot of things, I say, that just shouldn't be said. Last night, Nancy baked 2 pies. One for today and one for some other time. I was sitting in the recliner and she was letting them bake and she was on the computer. So, you know, I could go ahead and say nothing, but I said, "Hey mama, I smell that aroma coming out of the kitchen, talking about something that smells good." And eventually she brought them out and put a cage over each one. And it was time for me to go in the kitchen for something. And I said, "Oh, Grandma, those look so good." I suppose I could have said nothing or said something else. But figure out things that are nice to say. And don't, hey, can I say this? Don't always find the things that rub you the wrong way and say something about those. Is that worth thinking about? Well, I've learned this a long time ago, and I can do it righteously because Nancy is a good cook. I don't complain about anything, because she's got a disposition. If you don't like what I cook, you cook it from now on. And I'm not going to go there. Hello. I'm going to brag on her. And there's a lot of things in life we can bridle our tongue over and just not say those things, or look for things that we can say that puts a positive hip hip hooray in the atmosphere. When there's a dead calf, I see it, I'll never talk about it again. Nope. Unless we have to discuss what made it happen and what can we do the next time. We don't have to dwell on those things, because we deceive ourselves, we don't help ourselves. And the verse actually got down to business and said, your religion is vain if you travel the wrong road with your tongue. Now that's those earlier thoughts about bridling the tongue. Now, you just go home and you think, and this week you think, you can do your own homework on something like this. You don't need me to preach another sermon about it. Can you imagine how hard it is for a preacher to hit everything when everyone's there, and hope that you hit the right things when somebody finally comes to church? Talk about juggling. But anyway, here's a second thought out of the verses that we read. We are to practice pure religion. You don't hear it talk that way, do you? Not much in these days. What in the world can be pure religion? Well, I don't think it means that it has to be a sizable group at church to have pure religion. If that's true, I've never made it to the top. The biggest group I've ever preached to and led was 80 to 100 people. So someone expecting me to have a 300 or 400 group, I don't think I'm going to live long enough. But I sure hope we have some pure religion without a sizable something. And at the same time, pure religion doesn't mean that there has to be a level of wealth. Jesus never left this impression when he was on earth that there had to be a level of wealth among his people. And I don't think it has to mean that there has to be a super gospel singing team to make pure religion. We used to do this years ago. We had 18 or so people involved in the morning things where people sang quartets and trios and solos and puppetry. And things were really active around that. But you can't always have that happening. So I think you can have pure religion, what James says here, without what people think has to be religion today. Matter of fact, I don't think you have to lift your hands up all the time. I do it. I'm thankful. I've led songs. I've had my hands in the air a lot. But you know, of late, there's some kind of pain that goes right down through here. And I think I can be just religious with my hands on a different level. But be that as it may, the things that the average person thinks has to be church and pure religion are not God's standard necessarily. What our standard is to have a congregation where the Bible is taught, and taught with some substance, real substance. And we've tried to do that over the years. And you know that that's been true because we insert the Bible and formulate our thoughts around good scriptures that bring good thought and conviction. So what the average person thinks is pure religion, I don't know about that. Pure religion before God actually means religion that is acceptable to God, done decently and in order. Actually, God's religion has a different slant to it, a different touch to it. Pure religion actually is all about our faith in action. And that's what we just read about. Maybe we could say it's the golden rule in action. Everywhere you travel with Jesus and read in the scriptures, I mean, he avoided the temple a lot of times and all the fol-de-rol that went on there. His pure religion was on a different level. And personally, I've tried over the years to help people see that pure religion is different than what the average person thinks it is. And he names off two things here, pure religion: to help the orphans and the widows in their affliction. Now, whoever thinks of that as being a religious act? Well, Jesus is different. And that means we're going to be different. Widows in their affliction. In other words, help those who are legitimate in need, not just everyone. And I think that becomes more of an issue in our time than maybe ever before, because there's so many who are perpetual leaners and so many who are perpetual takers. Orphans and widows. And the Bible has some teaching on this, and I want to give it to you. Whoops, there's some Bible. 2 Thessalonians 3, 8 through 12. Watch these verses. This is Paul writing to the people at Thessalonica, and he's offering a thought to them because there was evidently some leaners and takers back in his day. Now, nobody's against legitimate help, but let's have legitimate people in need. In 2 Thessalonians 3, 8 through 12, Paul is saying this: neither did we, he and his helpers, eat any man's bread for naught, but we wrought with labor and travailed or worked hard night and day, that we might not be chargeable to any of you. Now, what's he talking about? Well, Paul, even though he was a preacher and had a right to be supported by the church funds, there were times that he went ahead and worked. He was a tent maker because he wanted to set an example. Well, let me read verse 9. Not because we have not the power, in other words, I could preach to you and you should support me, but to make ourselves an example unto you to follow us. Now, Paul knew that there were some lazy bums in that congregation. So he worked and he sweat. He set the example. And I know I've done that over the years. If you haven't seen me, you still have to have the spectacle before you when you see me in my coveralls or my bibs that are half worn out. And they didn't wear out because I bought them that way. I worked them that way. And I work a hole through my left knee before I work a hole through my right knee. Now, you figure that one out.
Fishing nails.
Anyway, set the example. Verse 10. For even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. Now, should that be a banner that flies over Washington today? And especially in our town, because people are moving from Chicago to our town because you can get these specials easier here than you can in Chicago. Now, what do you know about that? Stop your complaining, Dick. But it's true. And if any would not work, neither should he eat. Boo-hoo! They're going to get hungry. Well, I guess Paul's saying if they get hungry enough, they'll get out of the recliner and stop sucking on their cigarettes and drinking their booze and get down to business and do some work for what they eat. Verse 11, for we hear that there are some which walk among you, so must have been Christians, so-called pure religion, walk among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies. Do you need an interpretation of that? Spongers. What am I saying? Well, we're to take care of the legitimate, needy people, but not the spongers. And so when people call me, I ask them, where do you go to church? Well, they say, I don't go to church. You know what my next statement is? I say, do you suppose that you're in hot water and having troubles today because you haven't been going to church? I smile, they frown. I say, no, we do not give out money. We'll help you with food if you really are hungry. And I'm wondering if I'm violating this now. But I do offer that. They don't want food, they want money. Leaning. Now, Paul gave us some definite teaching, and I'm giving it to you this morning. Now, them that are such, busybodies and no working. Now, them that are such, we command and exhort by our Lord Jesus Christ, that with quietness they work and eat their own bread. Do you need an interpretation for that? I can even understand that one. Help the legitimate ones, and that's pure religion. So the Bible has spoken here, and I'm going to say this. Blessed are your parents that taught you to work, and blessed are you, now that you're a parent, that you're teaching your children to work. So that they know how to work, and they kind of get a kick out of working. You know what my greatest pleasure in working is? To get rid of the tough stuff first. Put that all behind you and the rest you coast somewhat. Work is work no matter what, though. I'm glad. You glad? I'm glad my dad taught me to work, and of course Mom did too in the garden. I'm glad we all worked together. It was just a part of life, and we didn't grumble and groan. Tomorrow we did some more work, and the next day we did some more work. And I thank God that they taught me to feel good about work. It feels good. Then add a blessing to that by giving to those who are truly needy, those who deserve. And I notice other teaching in the Bible that tells us that even the widows, the scriptures tell us to help, even the widows are to qualify to get help. They're to be at least 60 years old. You know that? And they're not to be busybodies in other people's affairs either. So even the widows are to qualify for a breadbasket. And that sure says more than what's going on today. But there's politics out there that's doing all this come and get it, Santa Claus stuff of our time. And we won't go there quite yet. I'm going to go there when I go to the ballot box. So that's a part of pure religion. You have what you have, you worked hard for it, and add, hey listen, now add a blessing to yourself, and of course to others. Add a blessing to yourself by helping those, the need that are legitimate. Now here's the second thing about pure religion. We're to keep ourselves unspotted from the world. Now doesn't that say there's a world out there that can spot you? Doesn't that say there's a world out there you need to avoid? You know, the Bible says in 1 John 2:15 through 17, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. For love of the world is the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes. Oh, you see it, you gotta have it. She looks good in that lack of dressing. I'd like to go to bed with her. Lust of the eyes. Lust of the flesh. Pass me that drink. Pride of life. We can get puffed up in our humble way and just say, I'm going to do it anyway. Love the world. But the world passeth away and the lust thereof. But he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. Get it. Do it. It's pure religion. Keep yourself unspotted. Don't you know we stay away from greasy machinery? Hey, have you ever had anybody come on Sunday and bring their new car that they new to them? They want you to come out and look at it. Then they up the hood and you kind of lean over and look in and you kind of hold your Sunday go to meeting clothes so that you don't get dirty. But worse than that, you headed for church in your good clothes and you have a flat tire and you got to get out and do something in your Sunday clothes. Keep yourself unspotted. Oh my goodness. How many of us stay away from fresh paint? Those crazy cats come walking across the porch that we just painted this morning. And you do it yourself. It doesn't make any difference how careful you are. If there's paint, you're going to get it. Now let me ask you this. How many of you keep yourself away from a hog confinement? You don't even want to drive by it. And for sure you don't want to go inside of it. Especially if somebody's inviting you to see something like that and it's on Sunday. You know what I'm talking about. There's things in this life that you keep yourself away from, and it just seems like your fluffy dress or suit or whatever it is, no matter how hard you try, you get home and what do you find? Yeah. So I go to Nancy and say, honey, how do you get this spot out of here? She has an answer of some kind. You stay away from this stuff. So we're to stay away from the world, lest we get spotted and corrupted and defiled and damaged. We're in this world, but we have to run from this stuff lest we get contaminated, which tells me that it's up to me to know what can spot me. Right? I read the scriptures. I go to church. I'm around godly people. I learn what can spot me. And boy, it doesn't take too long to be out there to realize what can truly spot you. And this is only talking about spots, but I'm talking about a whole avalanche. Those people who are addicted, they aren't just spotted, they're avalanched. And this all tells me that I'm the one to move. The world's not going to move. The world's going to keep coming at you. It's up to me to move. Right? I'll read you this. A man once said to a prominent preacher some years ago, he said, now that I'm converted, must I give up the world? No, the preacher answered. You don't need to give up the world. If you give a ringing testimony for the Son of God, the world will give you up. Yes. They will not want you to be around. Folks, do you want to be a preacher? Do you realize that there's a loneliness in being a preacher? Because people don't want to be around a preacher. Have you ever thought of that? I've sensed it all my life. Especially this guy that says a few things. And I try to keep my skirts clean. And you've seen it too out in your business world. They want you to have a beer with them, a smoke with them, a cuss with them, a dirty story with them. And the ladies have to stay away from the touch and the words and the whatever have yous. Because the world is trying to spot us, contaminate us. You know, the Bible says for us to love righteousness and hate iniquity, and that's exactly what Jesus did. And do you suppose that in the congregations all across this town and way out beyond, that they're getting a sermon like this morning? And you know I haven't done it too hard. I've only given you what's sensible. Yeah. Everything that Jesus has told us to do, it is for our own good. And I ask you, how many people out there would like to rewind the tape and live a part of their life all over again? What? So listen, our conscience, which is Bible educated, you're sitting there and you're listening. It's educating your conscience. You go home and do what you do and read your Bible and talk God way. You're educating your conscience. And that conscience is your red flag partner. And that conscience will help you tell you yes and tell you no. That conscience will help you stay unspotted from the world. And you know exactly what I'm talking about here. We as Christians do not practice sin. We stay away from that. For us, it's Bible, it's church, it's good friends, it's Jesus, it's family life, and it's living a loving life for Jesus. Staying unspotted. How about this little ditty? Which disturbs you the most? A soul lost in hell, or a scratch on your brand new car? Huh? Don't you park your car hoping you won't get a scratch? Something to think about. What disturbs you the most? You're missing, you're missing the worship service or missing a day's work. Who would ever think of a thing like that? What disturbs you the most? A sermon 10 minutes too long or a lunch half an hour late? We've already gone over 2 minutes, folks. What disturbs you the most? A church not growing or your garden not growing? Those deers wiped ours out. You want me to keep on reading here? What disturbs you the most? The church work being neglected or the housework being neglected? I don't know about that. What disturbs you the most? Missing a good Bible study or your favorite TV program? You know what I think? There's been so much corruption on TV these days that people are getting away from TV more and more and more. Do you feel that happening? What disturbs you most? The millions who do not know Christ or your inability to keep up with your neighbors? I lost that desire a long time ago. What disturbs you the most? The cry of the multitude for bread or your desire for another piece of German chocolate cake? Watch this one. What disturbs you the most? Your tithes decreasing or your income decreasing? Now that's getting too personal. This tithing thing is a struggle, isn't it? But you know, God's people in every way are to be generous people. I don't know if we work on that or have to work on that. But I think over the years we've taught you about tithing. You know what that is. That's not a token giving. That's a percent giving. And even otherwise, we're taught to be generous. And here in 2 Corinthians 9:6, Paul said, "But this I say, he which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly, and he that soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully." So whether it's a tithe aspect or what we do in life aspect, like with the widows, or just being generous with any part of life. It's connected to God. He said, "For God loveth a cheerful giver." We have no idea what God notices. We just pretty well have to chalk it up that God notices everything. And when we are generous people, God is going to be more generous back to us. Now, I don't know how all that works. As it is written, He hath dispersed abroad, he that hath given to the poor. His righteousness remaineth forever. Now that may be a little difficult to understand, but there's something here in this whole setting that if we are generous people, that last statement says, His righteousness, your righteousness, remaineth forever. I don't know if buying a different car does that, or putting on a new pair of shoes does that, or buying another suit of clothes does that, or shoveling the snow, or these other things that we do. This verse said that if you sow bountifully, that righteousness is going to last forever and ever. That talks to me. I think that settles in our soul very righteously. Don't you think?
Amen.
Yeah. Somehow, God sees to it that some way or other there's a bountifulness if we do the right things when we don't understand a whole lot of things. How do you like that, Steve? I think that's a good place to stop right there. Do the right always.